This is Samantha and Zessie.
It's your boy, Roy George Phillip, the first.
And this is Masculinity. Yep. Back again.
I've just been trying so hard at that.
You've been doing well. I try to do it, so I don't do it on the show because I'm still in my beginning stages. How are you?
I'm well. There's
you look
updates.
well.
Life is
Look
good.
tan.
Summer's over. The WNBA playoffs are starting. The NBA guys team sucked at World Basketball, so that's cool.
Didn't they go with France?
Yeah,
I almost watched it this morning, but I was working, so I didn't.
Well, what are you going to do?
Damn. Okay, well.
So we're talking about addiction and its connection to masculinity, hard K. So Samantha here uncovered some dope stats and info for our intro episode. Can you alley-oop a synopsis of that info?
Okay, really when we're looking at addiction, men have almost twice the chance for substance abuse addiction than women do. And second, the reason men fall prey to addiction is because of societal pressure and learned traditions, including being exposed to drugs and alcohol at a younger age.
So it's like super surreal to learn, like actually realize and unmask hard K, the fact that a lot of these things we think are so natural to men or masculinity are actually traits or traditions that are learned. Like the tradition of alcohol and drug consumption are learned from a very young age. So Samantha, we have someone here to talk about that, right?
Yeah, we do. Of course we do. You know we do. Why are you asking me that? Okay, so today we have Dennis Shinski, and Dennis is one of the subjects of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, documentary film called Digging in the Dirt. So Dennis, thank you so much for being with us. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
It's great to be here. Yeah.
The title Digging in the Dirt refers to individuals, and particularly the men who work in the oil industry in the Alberta oil sands. But really, it's so much more. So if you actually, Dennis, could just tell us a little bit more about Digging in the Dirt and how you are involved with the film.
Sure. So I just want to start off by saying it's oil sands, yes, but I think it's a lot of us in the northern Alberta and northern BC kind of region. So it kind of covers all the oil and gas industry with just some of the mentality. But what it's about is about kind of the culture within trades and industry and masculinity and sometimes, substance abuse and kind of being a man or the idea of a man within that industry. And, oil field or oil patch is big up in this area, right? A lot of people depend on it, and not everybody, heads down the same path that I was down, but, I think the probability of kind of running into trouble is definitely there because it's a kind of a work hard, play hard mentality, right? And as you guys know, with masculinity, sometimes it's not about sharing what you're going through. It's about stuffing it down. And sometimes, the way that's kind of the culture is about sometimes drinking or using away problems or getting to the bar and partying things away, right? So especially when there's days off, sometimes, I know for me, I would party for days on end, right? So
I like what you're all talking about because we are talking about masculinity, and you're pretty much talking about everything we've been talking about for the last 3 years. So this is a good sign. But I don't know if you know this, Dennis. I don't know if our listeners know this. Most of you do. I grew up in the Texas Panhandle, and there's all sorts of oil work going on there. I do have some friends who worked and currently work in the industry. Yeah, but I don't know really anything about what that looks like day to day, and I probably have this romanticized idea of the industry. So, Dennis, can you kind of describe what that work is like day to day and how demanding that is?
Yeah, so I'll just start kind of where I started. I started when I was 19 years old, and I started working for a company, and I was in their shop, and I was helping out. And it was a short time, and I was out in the field working, at a minimum 12 hours a day, sometimes up to 18 hours a day, traveling in big trucks to different well sites and servicing wells out in the elements. So in the wintertime, summertime, rain, shine, didn't matter. It was, we worked really hard. And there was almost like a badge of honor on how hard we would work And sometimes we would be in the bars in different towns and partying it up, but also getting to work the next day and, and getting the job done. Right. And then I'd get days off, and that would be the topic of conversation at the table at the bar in town, with my friends that were on days off. It was like talking about what we did and how we got it done. And, I think it just helped promote more of that behavior. And, that sometimes up in this area, I don't know if you guys know, but like it can get to minus 40 degrees Celsius and you're out, you're up. So minus 40 in Fahrenheit, I think, is the same as in Celsius. So if you can imagine trying to run equipment in men in the elements, working outside for sometimes not, that whole 12 hours, but, you have to warm up when you can and you're out there. Yeah, it's challenging, right? So of course there's kind of a badge of honor of getting through that, but celebrating through drinking and like those types of things, that's what I did anyway. And that kind of carried on for years. And I partied a lot on my days off, but I sometimes partied at work and showing up to work under the influence or hurting from the night before. And it just wasn't seen as a problem. It was just kind of seen as the norm a lot of times, right? And I knew different, but the culture just kind of reinforced that behavior, and it just became the norm.
I haven't worked in the oil industry, but I've worked in construction, especially here in New York, and it's a lot very much that same mentality of it's a badge of honor. It's hard, it's diligent. You don't talk much about what you're feeling outside of glorifying this like strength and this idea of being a strong man, right? And some men show up drunk, some men after the job go straight to the bar and drink all night long. So, but to talk about that and to talk about your experience, what we've been talking about on this podcast and this particular subject is how stories are kind of fed to children about this strength and this masculinity, predominantly boys, of how this is glorified and this is what you should be when you grow up, or this is what you should achieve to be or aspire to be, this kind of strong man that is stoic as all get out. So do you remember that as a boy, Dennis? Did you encounter that? Do you remember that, like, as a boy, whether TV, movies, books, your father, your family, whatever, kind of passing on these narratives of being a man?
Well, a thing that stands out the most to me is a cold beer at the end of a long work day with, and I don't mean me, I mean my family members, my dad, my uncle, my grandpa, like things like that. And you know what? At the end of the day, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it does, kids pick up on that, teenagers, and then kind of getting into my teenage years, like, we took on some of that behavior and started drinking, and it became, about who could drink the most or who could, chug this, or it kind of became, again, going back to that badge of honor, and it's just like tapping into that masculinity thing too. It became about, almost like this competitiveness with consuming. And I'm, and I want to say that it's not that I totally disagree with drinking either. I believe that it can be socially done, but for me, that type of behavior paved the way for more of that, right? I just kind of got into it not knowing that, what I was going to end up kind of getting into just by having that. And you know what, there were times when I would work hard, even when I was of age. I would work really hard and and have a couple beers at the end of the day, but it wasn't very long, and I was, I couldn't put it down. Like, it just wasn't a couple beers. It was usually a 6-pack or more, or or going to the bar after, even though I had to work the next day. And it just kind of, for me, it just escalated quickly, right? And I never saw that coming. I just thought I was doing what kind of everybody else was doing. So
yeah, and I think that's like a good segue, because I think, the stories, those bequeathed stories, then have an effect on you whether you knew it or not, right? And so, we learn about your struggle with addiction in Digging in the Dirt. And so just want to see if you can go into a little bit more detail about your struggle with addiction as a young adult.
Yeah, so I started drinking when I was like 13 years old, and my friend introduced me to it. And because I was 13, it's not like I had a whole bunch of money. So I kind of did it when I could, and I enjoyed the effects. I liked, feeling different, and it's almost like it kind of gave me that social lubrication where I could just, let go. Well, it wasn't long. By the time I was like, 16, 17, I was doing it all the time. And then by the time I was of age, because yeah, we're 18 years old in Alberta, right? Which is different than you guys. So we can buy alcohol at 18, and it was a free for all. And then I got into the oil field at 19, making all this coin, and I just let loose. Like I had as much money as my father did working the oil patch, and I was 19. So, that definitely fueled the fire for me. And I had no sense of control or responsibility with some of this stuff. So, I started doing drugs that I said I would never do, and, got just involved in that kind of whole world, and, doing drugs on my days off and partying all the time and trying to kind of, yeah, trying to manage it while I was at work. But sometimes there was times when I would come into town for a night or two and I'd be out using and go to work the next day. Right. So, but it's really started taking its toll when I was using it on my good days, my bad days, any type of like life events that would happen. I would want to like numb out, especially if they were uncomfortable life events or stressful or relationships or breakups or like any of those things. I became dependent on it, you guys. Like it was hard for me to put it down. And when I put it down, it's all I could think about. It became not only dependency, but an obsession. Right. And the compulsion to use it, especially when I drank, if I had a couple of drinks in me, the compulsion to go pick up, drugs, dope, was just unbearable. Like it was like an automated thing. Right. So it got to that point for me. And, further along the line, as it got so bad that I lost everything I owned, so up here, I was 21 years old and I had a house, I had a truck, I had, like a lot of these material things, but on the inside, I was falling apart. I was not coping with life very well. I wasn't managing the money I was making anymore. I had a lot of like kind of unhealthy friends that were using, and I was having troubles at work by like showing up or getting in trouble, and it was starting to go downhill, and I ended up failing a drug test, and they wanted to send me to treatment, and I just said like I wasn't ready for that. So I just said, yeah, I let things get out of hand. I can figure this out. And I think this ties back to the masculinity thing. It's just like I wanted control again. I told myself I need to figure this out, and I'm going to do it on my own because that's what men do. And what I should have done was, looked at my problem and said, go get some help, Dennis, or at least admit you have a problem. But I didn't. I tried to go the other direction and get a hold of it. But what ended up happening was, I was failing at that. And the pain with, losing my job and everything else as I drove further into addiction. And I started using all the time with people that were dealing and, people that were using on the streets, and I ended up there for a bit too. And like, it was just, I got wrapped up in that whole world, and I was using all the time at that point. And it was a daily struggle for a long time. I lost a lot of weight and I was really sick. So,
well, I want to thank you for sharing that. And I also kind of want to pivot a little bit back to what you said about, like going back to essentially the performance of masculinity, right? Like there's a sense that even though you're surrounded by people who are kind of who are doing like similar things to what you're doing in terms of just like drinking a lot or using and stuff like that, there's still, it sounds like there's still a sense of like having to do it on your own. And I just wonder if you could kind of talk about that experience a little bit and like how kind of the environment that you were in kind of led to that, if that makes sense.
I think we live in a world today, especially with men, is just like back to that kind of badge of honor thing, is just like, if you're doing this all on your own, like you get the credit kind of idea. I don't need help. I'll figure this out. And I've done that since I was younger. I just, I'm going to figure this out. I need to, find control, and and, and then if you did it, I think that reinforced the behavior. It's just like, I need to do more stuff on my own. It wasn't about reaching out. It wasn't about sharing what I was feeling or what I was going through, because that was why I used, is how I felt on the inside. And when I used it, it numbed the pain. Like it made it temporarily go away, not knowing that this is going to create a monster that I'm not going to be able to control anymore. That wasn't ever my intentions. I just wanted the pain to go away. So, going back to the masculinity thing, it's just like, then when I was in that, being a man is figuring it out, and that's what I was taught, not from my father so much, but society and my peers, especially working in trades and industry. It was kind of a, sometimes it was a little bit rough out there, and everybody's talking about how tough they are and they did this and they did that, right? So you get exposed to that for long enough, it becomes your environment, and then you start acting like that, right? And it's tough. I mean, there's other guys I know that are getting into the industry, and I can see them getting wrapped up in it too, because it becomes almost like a subculture of our mainstream culture and this mentality, right? So
yeah, this is really cool, because after watching Digging in the Dirt, we see you, Dennis, and we see other men particularly finding like this mental space and this forgiveness to identify not like only the addiction, but how the addiction became like this, like almost parasite in your and in their lives. Can you talk more about that and what that experience was like? Like, what you talked about it almost hitting rock bottom, or definitely hitting rock bottom. What led you, whether it was good and or bad, to that place where you were able to be like, okay, something needs to change here?
So, well, when I was spending time in like hotel rooms and a little bit of time like on the kind of in the street and at drug houses and stuff, like I definitely knew there's a problem. I didn't have any control whatsoever, but I ended up kind of getting back to a semi-normal life, but I kind of had one foot in addiction and one out. And so I didn't get out of that until about 6 years. So I fought with addiction and that old life, for a long time. I went through a lot of relationships. My family had a hard time trusting me, and it was hard for them to have me around to watch me do that to myself. But also, like, just going through that so many times, like, yeah, when I was at my worst, I would call that a bottom, but I hovered near the bottom for 6 years until I'd done those things so many times over and over and over. And when I did reach out for help, it was kind of like half-assed. Like, I didn't get honest, and I didn't tell a counselor or a human resources or whoever was trying to help. I didn't tell them the full truth because I was ashamed of what I was up to. I was a drug addict. It's not like the proudest thing to be in this world, especially, the shame and being ostracized for having a problem. So I'm not going to sit and, tell these people. Well, I got to a point where I was in so much pain, and I was about to lose my girlfriend, my place, everything I was working hard to get back. I was about to lose it again. And I said, I got to do something different. I have to. My life depends on it. And I went and got help. I went and talked to an addictions counselor, started going to some meetings, some 12 steps, some mental health meetings, started doing like addictions counseling all the time. I started, reconnecting with my family and my healthy friends that weren't, using all the time and that supported my recovery. And, things started getting better for me. And I had to stop using drugs and alcohol, like total abstinence, because that was part of my problem. And in order for me to work on myself, I had to put that stuff aside, because me trying to get better and use at the same time, it wasn't in the cards anymore. I'd done that enough times to know that I end up in the same spot every time I pick up, a drug or alcohol. I can't put it down. That's how I'm wired. I used to think it was such a shitty thing, a shameful thing. There's something wrong with me, but it's just how I'm wired. I have that personality, and I laugh because I've now learned to live with that, and I try to use it in a positive way, because I can stay focused on something, if I put my mind to it. Just like if I put my mind to drug addiction, like I can get that up and running and do a damn good job at that. So I'm going to take that same energy and put it towards my recovery and start giving an honest effort to changing. And it worked for me with the help of others, of course. That's a big one for me. I didn't do this on my own. And I can't stress that enough about, reaching out and using, if you can have a professional or somebody that can help you out with what you're going through. That's one of my biggest suggestions is reach out. Maybe you have a family member or a close friend or somebody that you can talk to, or resources in your community or city or whatever that looks like.
I just want to make one quick point, because it sounds like, really getting vulnerable and like telling the truth about yourself and what you were dealing with was really pivotal to you kind of getting a sense of self that would make you empowered, it sounds like. And I think like that's such an important point to make, because, on the show, we've talked a lot about, vulnerability being power, being empowering to just tell your truth.
Oh, yeah. It is.
And so I really appreciate that, what we're saying.
Well, and you guys know about like Brene Brown's work, right? About vulnerability, right? And just the shame. And that's the only way for me to deal with it, is to take an emotional risk and get vulnerable and say, hey, I was talking to the counselor. I said, hey, listen. And I laid it all out on the table. I named all the drugs. I named all the alcohol. I named all the behaviors and actions. And I just threw it all out there. And I cried after. I broke down, because what I figured out that day is I don't do anything without drugs and alcohol. My social life is consumed by it, my work life and everything. And it was a moment where I felt so raw, and I felt like this desperate, this feeling of desperation within me. But the good thing is once we were all done, she said, after today, like, you don't have to use this stuff anymore. I'm going to help you. I want to help you with your coping mechanisms. I want to help you with the problems you're having in life. We can look at your finances. And she started looking at my major life areas, right? Who I was hanging out with, what I was doing at work, what I was spending money on, what my relationships look like, just these things. And I never really looked at that for a long time, and it was scary, but we started paving the path to my recovery, right? So yeah, it was beautiful.
Wow.
It wasn't beautiful at the time. I look back now, and I can say that it's beautiful, but at the time I was so scared. I'm just like, what does this look like? I'm used to using all the time. I'm used to that world. So what does this new world look like? I thought recovery was going to be boring, but now I'm doing a podcast with you guys, and this is far from boring. Like I've done more in recovery than I did in the 10 years of active addiction, right? So,
well, damn, actually, this is perfect segue. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing? Let's talk about the work you're doing now, what you're working toward. In the film, sounds like you're working toward a social work degree, which is pretty dope.
Yeah, so I continued to work in the oil field, and I decided I wanted to go back to school one day to get a degree in social work. So I saved up my money in the oil field, and I had a great time now that I was in recovery, working in the oil patch again, because I was making good money. I was healthy. I had boundaries. It wasn't about one-upping the next guy beside me. I was comfortable with who I was again. So, and I had a great schedule at work, and things started to come together. So I was able to put together some money, and I decided to go back to school. I guess it would be, over 3 years ago, and started working towards a social work degree. Well, I'd been out of school for 16 years. And so me going back, and I didn't finish high school, you guys. I didn't get a diploma, which I'm currently working on, just to throw that in there. But I'm going to work on getting that, because that was another source of shame for me, is I didn't finish high school, and I would carry that around too, right? And so anyway, going back, I got some upgrading done. I got into some open studies classes to do with kind of social work, so psychology, anthropology, sociology. And I started working towards it. And I just got accepted last spring to the University of Calgary in the BSW program. And I just, started classes here for that. And, I just didn't think I was capable of this, you guys. Like, I really didn't. Because, as a drug addict, sometimes we're our worst enemy. And, when I was in the middle of that, I just didn't think I was going to amount to nothing. And, it's recovery has shown me that, we can all do it. Right. And, so I went after what I was passionate about. And, some of the men out there have said that I gave up, because I gave up a pretty good job to go back to school, but it's about following my passion. Like, I don't think I'd be on this podcast right now or helping out people or doing the things I'm doing if I would have stayed in the oil field. I just don't. I think that I've turned my, instead of it going to work, I'm going to go to work, but also, feel passionate about what I'm doing when I'm at work. Right. So,
yeah.
I don't know if it's okay to talk about like the States or whatever, but like this just isn't a Canadian thing or a Northern Alberta thing. Like the rates that I did some research in school on suicide, and so the rates are like across North America, like, in trades and industry. So construction, oil field, like trades, welding, like all these things, this is a North American thing. So the States is involved.
Oh, yeah.
The rates are, men are 3 to 4 times more likely than women to kill themselves. The rates are through the roof. This is not just a Northern Alberta thing. This is a countrywide thing. This is our North America is a continent wide, right? We're losing men.
Yeah. And and that's why we're grateful that, folks like you come forward and really do the work to get themselves to a point where, they're free and they're empowered. And so really shout out to you for, getting vulnerable and being able to tell your story. Yeah, inspiring us, inspiring others who are listening to this right now to, just put themselves out there. So, we just want to thank you for being here. We'll definitely be posting the information. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you guys can stream it on cbc.ca, or you can stream it on CBC's mobile app, which is CBC Gem.
So for you all out there listening, thank you so much for listening today, and we'll be posting the information at Masculinity Pod. It is now Masculinity Pod with a K on all platforms. Yay! So that's easy. And so, drop us some stars. You know what I mean? Just connect up to your favorite radio podcasting platform and put a little review. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for listening. My name is Samantha Zessi.
It's your boy, Ramoy George Phillip, the first.
And this has been Masculinity. Thank you for listening.
Peace.
Ciao.